And
yeah,
I was wondering that whether I'm reading the CV of a retired professor or a retired civil servant.
No, I did a lot of research as a senior fellow in Center for Women's Development Studies, particularly focused on gender issues.
Yes.
And my book on the women in panchayats, really with the 1200 interviews, really they made a mark. So I was very, so now I'm looking at another book similarly, but on my experiences and lessons. Hopefully I should be able to do that. Yeah. But good, yeah.
Wonderful, ma'am.
Thank
I was
you.
also reading your EPW article about the two-child norm for
Yeah.
panchayat elections.
Yeah.
And-
Good morning, Arvind sir.
I got the law changed in 5 states. On that
Oh,
basis,
wow.
they amended and removed that. And now the court is also saying that it should not be there.
Yes.
Otherwise, earlier they had said no, it is yes legal, but I had said that the size of family that has nothing to do with their job,
True.
and that's not the way. That's not the
True,
way.
true.
And, yeah,
That judgment of the Supreme Court was criticized, the Rajbala case.
yeah, yeah. Now, but earlier they had said it is constitutionally valid. Yes, of course, constitutionally state has the power, but where should you use it? In what manner? And we cannot copy China. China had such problems because of that law. Their party parties used to force people to go for abortion.
True, sir. We welcome Professor Arvind Tiwari from Tata Institute of Social Sciences also. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Yeah. And good morning to Madam Goch and Professor Jaswal. Good morning.
Very good morning, sir.
Fine, sir. How are you, sir?
Very fine, sir. Thank you. Good. Nice to see you again.
Yes, sir.
9:58. Actually, she's also come. बता दो आपका बता दो आपका
Krishna ma'am, we can start.
Oh, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
हाँ.
So, with the permission of all the panelists, shall we start?
Yes, please.
Good morning, one and all. Welcome to the plenary session 1 of the International Conference on the Changing Dimensions of Human Rights, organized by Dharmashastra National Law University, Jabalpur. We have with us 3 panelists for the day, 3 eminent scholars and writers and academicians. We have Madam Nirmala Buch, we have Professor Paramjit Jaswal and Professor Arvind Tiwari with us. And we have 5 participants for this session who will be presenting their papers. I welcome Dr. Manindra Tiwari, Associate Professor, Dharmashastra National Law University, to moderate the session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Veena ma'am. A very good morning to all present. Respected Nirmala Buch ma'am, respected Professor Paramjit Jaswal sir, respected Professor Arvind Tiwari sir, convener of this international conference, Dr. Shilpa Jain, coordinator and also the in charge for this session, Dr. Veena Roshan, faculty members of Dharmashastra National Law University, our very distinguished paper presenters, participants, viewers, and the students of Dharmashastra National Law University. I welcome all of you to this plenary session in day 2 of this international conference on globalization and human rights and its interface with globalization. We have with us in today's plenary session 3 very distinguished scholars in their own sphere. And starting with Ms. Nirmala Butch, ma'am is a retired Indian Administrative Service officer and somebody who has also served as the Chief Secretary of the state of Madhya Pradesh. But all the participants here will be very happy to know that apart from her administrative skills, which you can see from the fact that she has served as the Chief Secretary of the state of Madhya Pradesh, she is a prolific writer and somebody who works very closely with gender issues. And she has worked with government on several projects. She has written 3 wonderful books, and one of her books published by Routledge on Operation to Assertion, Women and Panchayats in India, is very well received. And we were talking to ma'am and she told us that this book has led to the change of laws in respect of the eligibility criteria for the election to panchayats in 5 different states. So we are very, very happy to have you, ma'am. Thank you very much for giving your consent to be with us. I welcome you to this plenary session. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, you need to unmute.
Yeah. If I could just add, I asked my colleague, Ms. Dr. Nandi, who's the DG of the National Center for Human Settlement and Environment. There were good papers on the climate change. I asked him to also come and listen to the paper. Thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Nandi.
Thank you. We welcome, sir. If we could see sir, who is welcome, sir. We welcome you and thank you for your time. We have also among our midst Professor Dr. Paramjit S. Jaswal. Sir needs no introduction. Nevertheless, as the moderator, I am supposed to introduce him. Sir is the former Vice Chancellor of Rajiv Gandhi National University of Law, Patiala, former Vice Chancellor of Hidayatullah National Law University, Raipur, and presently, sir is serving as the Vice Chancellor of SRM University. And sir has written around 32 books and more than 70 research papers. And as I said, sir need no introduction. Sir, it's been an absolute honor and privilege to have you with us. And thank you very much for your very precious time. And I must also tell all of us that sir has joined us from Shimla. And -2 degrees and at 10 a.m. itself is not an easy job for somebody sitting in Shimla. So thank you for that also, sir. Thank you very much. We have also been joined by Professor Arvind Tiwari from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. And the participants will be happy to know, especially those who are from the state of Madhya Pradesh, that sir is a very distinguished alumnus of Sagar University. And sir has done his MA and PhD from Sagar University, the presently HS Gaur Central University of Sagar. And sir is a prolific scholar in the field of criminology and related field. And we are very, very happy to have you amongst us, sir. Thank you very much for giving your consent to be with us. So as everybody knows that this is a plenary session, wherein we have 5 presenters, 4 of whom happens to be already teachers in different faculties, different universities, and 1 is the research scholar. And these papers have been selected as among the best papers that we received for this international conference, and that's why we have we have this plenary session wherein these papers are to be presented. And I must also inform the presenters that our distinguished panelists, the 3 panelists that we have, along with the co-panelist with Nirmala ma'am, they will be judging the presenters for the presentation that they will be giving. And we also have this prize for best paper, and the best paper prize will be evaluated out of obviously the written content plus your oral presentation that you are about to give in this plenary session. So that also automatically raises the significance of this particular plenary session. And we would also request the 3 guests that we have to kindly judge the participants also on their presentation skills. apart from the quality of the papers written by them, and also request you to kindly give us your scores as soon as possible after this plenary session gets over. So about the format, we have, as I said, 5 speakers who will be presenting their papers. Maximum time allocated to each speaker is 15 minutes. And even while they are giving their presentation or after they have finished their presentation, our three distinguished guests specifically, or even anyone from the audience, but I would request the audience that if you have any observations or comments to make, you should do it after the presentation is over. But our three guest panelists, they are free to intervene even when somebody is presenting. If they have to make a point, you are more than welcome to intervene. And obviously, at the end of all 5 presentations, we would want the 3 guests to tell us something about the papers in general and the issues pertaining to human rights in particular, if at all they have anything to say. So, with the permission of our guests, I would now like to invite the first speaker that we have for this plenary session. I would request the speakers that before they start presenting their papers, they must introduce themselves, their affiliation with the university, and then they should proceed. So starting with, we have Dr. Asha Verma. May I request Dr. Asha Verma to present her paper. Her paper is on a study on the rights of the street vendors, India and international perspective. Ma'am. Asha Verma, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. I'll just take a second, sir, to share my presentation. Is it visible, sir? Is it
Yeah, visible.
Okay, but I'm not able to see it. Is it visible to you, sir?
It
Yes.
says loading Microsoft Teams. This is what we could see.
Is it okay now?
Loading Microsoft Teams, and there is a logo of Microsoft. This is what we could see.
Just a second, sir. Just a second. I'm sorry. It will just take a second, sir. Is it visible now, sir?
Not yet.
Not yet, ma'am.
Okay, okay.
If you have any difficulty, you can present it twice.
I think it should be visible
Yeah,
now,
it's
sir.
coming. Now it's visible, ma'am.
Okay, and I'm also visible, sir. I'm visible.
Yeah,
as well as
you are.
Okay, okay. So a very good morning, honorable panelists for this session and all the other participants. I, Dr. Asha Verma, Assistant Professor of Law at Gujarat National Law University, Gandhinagar, would like to present my paper on a study on the rights of street vendors, Indian and international perspective. The scheme of presentation that I'll be following is as follows: conceptualization, formulation of research problem, objectives of the study, hypothesis, research questions that I have framed for the study, review of related literature, research methodology that I have adopted for the study, scope and limitations of the study, national and international perspective, the findings of the study, and lastly, I'll be moving to the conclusion and the suggestions part. Now, starting with the first part of my presentation, the conceptualization. When it comes to the basic question, who are street vendors? The answer lies in the section 2L of the Street Vendors Protection of Livelihood and Regulation of Street Vending Act of 2014. This is the act which came into force in the year 2014. It defines the street vendors as those persons who are engaged in the vending of articles, goods, etc., or those who are offering these services to the general public in a street, land, sidewalk, footpath, pavement, public park, public places, private places. They may also be they may also have the permanent place where they can practice their profession. They may be mobile, or they may be having the temporary such place. So this is how this Street Vendors Act defines who are these street vendors. Now, coming to the problem that lies with these street vendors is, and we specifically, when we look at the data which is available through the various studies which are conducted, maximum of 2.5% of the city's population are estimated to be street vendors. And specifically, National Census 2011, it put the national urban population at 2.77 million. And
Asha, you have said 2.5% of city's population. You are talking across all cities, or you are talking about a particular city?
no, sir, I'm talking about the urban population of a particular city. Like 2.5%
No, that is not clear from your presentation. Even your presentation says that maximum 2.5% of city population are estimated to be street vendors. If I take a general view of the statement, that means in every city, this is the percentage.
Yes, sir. Street vendors amount to this person, sir.
Have you got anything basis for that to come to this conclusion of that in every city this percentage?
Sir, there is this National Association on Street Vendors. So this basically keeps on conducting these surveys, sir. So as per the surveys that have been conducted, through that this data is there, sir.
Again, the question lies whether the association has conducted the survey of each and every city across national and international cities, or of a few cities.
Most of the cities, sir, they have done, sir.
Then you cannot make the statement like this.
Okay, sir.
I don't know. That is my personal view. That's what.
Okay, sir.
Anyway, proceed further.
Okay, sir. So, going to the next important point, and that again is as per the National Policy for Urban Street Vendors, which has also on the basis of data has revealed that approximately 10 million street vendors are there. Now, going to the next important point and highlighting the first important point only regarding conceptualization, and looking at the data which is available as per the national census and the surveys which have been conducted from time to time through the town planning committee and all, the integral segment of this unorganized sector that actually amounts to these street vendors. So they are the integral segment of this unorganized sector. And out of that also, the women constitute the large segment of this total population. And the main source of employment which remains with these street vendors is basically they are self-employed, and they also provide the affordable and convenient services to the customers. So in this way, they are also one of the integral part of the economy of any nation. Now moving to the next important point, that is the formulation of research problem. Now, as far as the street vendors are concerned, they have always remained the integral part of several economies around the world. And looking at the main problems that the street vendors face, one is that they have very limited access to the formal regulated market spaces, and they cannot receive the state level support for formal training, education, and also the credit institutions are also not very much supporting them. So there is a lack of state level support to the street vendors. And the another problem which is connected with these street vendors, although we have this Act of 2014 also, but the other problems that the street vendors face is regarding the unregistration or the unrecognition and the records which are available, that data which are available. There's a lack of that appropriate data regarding the street vendors. And when it comes to the effective legal framework, the existing labor laws, whether they are applicable to the street vendors or not, there is a lack of effective legal framework for the street vendors. Now, coming to the international perspective, there are various ILO conventions. There are fundamental 8 ILO conventions which talk about the decent work and which emphasizes on the welfare of the working class globally. But there is no such specific ILO convention on street vendors. So this is also one of the problem when we are talking about the problems of the street vendors at a global level. Then adding to it, although my paper was submitted before this corona crisis, but during this COVID-19 pandemic, I have also realized, the researcher has also realized that it has again raised various problems with these street vendors when they really had to face the problem relating to their livelihood, relating to fulfillment of basic necessities of life. Other than that, there are some criminal laws which are also applicable, like when we talk about section 268 of Indian Penal Code, wherein the public nuisance has been defined. So these street vendors, they also have to face such criminal actions also under various the laws, the municipal laws which are applicable in a particular state. So other than the Act of 2014 that we have, the government also in the year 2004 came up with the National Policy on Urban Street. Now, 6 years have elapsed of passing of this Act of 2014 and the policy which was framed in the year 2004. Later on in 2000, again, the government came up with this national policy on the urban street vendors. But the reality is that when it comes to the effective implementation of this Act, when it comes to the applying the various provisions of this scheme, we are lacking somewhere, and the street vendors still faces the problem relating to livelihood. There is a problem relating to eviction. There is a problem relating to the non-implementation or effective implementation of the Act. There is the problem relating to lack of recognition. So these are some of the problems that the street vendors are facing. Other than that, the problems, yes, ma'am? Yes, ma'am? Other than these, the problems relating to abuse, harassment, relocation, lack of social security benefits, these are the major problems that the street vendors are facing. Now, with this, the objectives of the study that were decided by the researcher were to study the problems and challenges of the street vendors in India, to examine the laws and schemes of the government to safeguard the rights of the street vendors in India, to look into the catena of International Labour Organization conventions and standards, to give the recognizance to the street vendors' right, to study the inclusion of ILO standards in the domestic laws applicable in different countries, to evaluate the constitutional protections available to the street vendors, to critically evaluate the provisions under the Street Vendors Protection of Livelihood and Regulation of Street Vending Act of 2014. Now, as far as the objectives of the study are concerned, I have already covered the problems and challenges that the street vendors in India are facing. I have also covered just now about the laws, schemes, the policy of the government which are applicable. Now I'll be focusing upon the ILO conventions and the other international conventions which are applicable as far as the rights of the street vendors are concerned. Now, looking at the international scenario, the International Labour and Human Rights treaties, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948, has also the principles relating to protecting the rights of the workers and also to provide the decent working condition. Especially when we talk about the ILO conventions, there is Prevention of Discrimination, Employment and Occupation Convention of 1958, and secondly, the Employment Policy Convention 1964, and these are the two ILO convention of 1958 and 1964, which clearly states that right to social dignity in employment is a fundamental human right, and infringement upon it violates the principles of free and open competition in addition to individual rights to work and non-discrimination. Now coming to the constitutional protections which are available to the street vendors, this also was one of the objective of my study, and in my research.
Excuse me. Manvanji, how much time she has for presentation?
So, sir, maximum time is 15 minutes. She still have 3-4 minutes left, sir.
What I would request Ashaji,
Yes, sir.
have you analyzed any secondary data, anything? Please come to that, because these legal provisions and all those are known to us and participants also, I understand. If you will come, what kind of data you are analyzing? Have you collected any primary data? If not, the secondary data. And what is because one of the objectives of critical analysis. What is the critical analysis? Please come to that, and then your suggestions and recommendations. Yes.
True.
Thank you, sir. So I have done the related literature review also for the study, and the study is purely doctrinal in nature. So I have solely rely on the articles available, the books, the reports, the online resources, and the ILO conventions and recommendations. So the study is only made on the basis of the secondary sources available, and there were limitations also for that, because street vendors is such a profession where there are multifarious jobs that these street vendors are doing. So simply having the empirical data regarding a class of vendors may not be applicable to other class of or category of street vendors. So the limitation was that only the secondary study could have been undertaken, and with the secondary sources study, the researcher has reached to the conclusion that there is the lack of proper or effective implementation of the act, and the studies have also revealed that in some of the states, even the town vending committees have not been constituted, and most of the zones wherein the vendors can exercise their profession that have been identified on a local basis only, and no consultation of TVC, that is town vending committee, has been taken. As far as the grievance of redressal is considered, there are only 4 states, Madhya Pradesh, Nagaland, Punjab and UP, who have actually constituted this grievance redressal mechanism, which is very, very important in order to address any such problem that these street vendors are facing, because there is no such mechanism available for them wherein they can approach. So redressal committees were the main forum where they would have approached, but there are 4 states only who have till now established these grievance redressal agencies. Then there is also a problem regarding rules, whether the rules and schemes have been notified by the various governments or not, because the effective implementation is in the hands of the state government. So whether that effort has been taken or not. So here also there is a lacuna that some of the states, they haven't yet notified the rules and the schemes. When it comes to the cancellation of certificate of the vendors, there is again some lacuna, because some of these states, they are simply cancelling the certificate on the ground that there was a misbehavior on the part of the vendor. Now, what amounts to misbehavior, that has not been very clearly mentioned, or it is not very well highlighted that what conduct will amount to the cancellation of the certificate. So these are some of the challenges, these are some of the lacunas that the researcher has found through the study. And lastly, I just want to conclude and suggest that microcredit loans and the provisions relating to social security for the street vendors, the proper infrastructure facility and the unionization will help them. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Asha Verma.
Thank you, sir.
I would now request our distinguished panelists if they have to make any comment about the paper that Dr. Asha just presented.
We asked a question to her where we have a doubt.
Okay. Nirmala ma'am, since you also work closely with urban planning issues, if you have to make any comments about this particular issue in general, this street vendors issue.
Yeah, did you see any conflict between the formal shops and these vendors in the same place? And secondly, sometimes the shops themselves have created the vendors. So, lastly, in the COVID period, did you see more street vending, because that's what's available and the formal shops are not available?
Okay. Should I answer now?
Yeah, Dr. Asha, please respond.
Ma'am, as far as the competition in the market is concerned, it is always there. Like street vendors, since there is no such a strict mechanism available to regulate their conditions of service. Therefore, there is always that competition in the market, and they are adversely affected by it. Now, as far as the COVID situation is
Sorry to
concerned,
interrupt you. Did you see hawkers corners? Because states have also devised hawkers corners, particularly for them, a support system. Yeah.
yes, ma'am. As per the provisions of the Act also, there are these zones which have been identified, and TVC actually take care that they are not evicted. They are not evicted from the zones which have been allocated to them unless there is any such issue wherein any such action has to be taken against them, or they have violated any such condition which has been laid down in the license issued to them. Otherwise, there cannot be any such eviction. And especially states like Delhi, very recently, Delhi has taken that initiative of protecting the rights of street hawkers. Similarly, in Maharashtra also, these steps have been taken. But what I see, ma'am, is that there is no such universality as far as protecting the rights of the street hawkers is concerned. Some of the states have very proactively taken care, and the TVC is also very actively working. The proper surveys are being conducted, but that only amounts to 25% of the total states. So the actual implementation still is required on part of the other states who haven't yet constituted the TVC, who haven't yet conducted the survey so as to ascertain the number of street vendors that we have. And for the, can I move to the second question now?
Yeah, please do quickly.
Okay. As far as the second question is concerned, during COVID crisis, the street vendors have been badly affected because I mean, the police torture was so much with them. They were simply because of the reason that they were not wearing a mask, or because of any reason they were not simply allowed to do their business, and there was some such incidents we have seen in the newspapers, that simple lathi charge and all to get them evicted. So I think there was a sheer human right violation when it comes to protecting the rights of these street vendors, especially during this corona crisis. But I would also like to add that during June 2020 only, Pradhan Mantri Narendra Modi, he came up with this initiative of Swanidhi Yojana. That is providing this credit loan of 10,000 rupees to each of this street vendor for a period of 1 year on a very low interest rate, so that whatever loss they have suffered during this corona crisis, at least they can cover it up. So I take this initiative, this scheme of the present government very, very effective, which will actually help them to regain, locate, to re-establish themselves the loss that they have suffered during this corona crisis.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Asha.
Thank you.
We'll now go to our next presenter, Dr. Shashti.
Manuel, I have asked a couple of questions, 2, 3.
Sure. Please, sir, please.
About methodology.
Please, sir.
Tell me, what is the difference between hypothesis and research questions? Both of you have framed both hypothesis and research question. And is there any logical interpretation and conclusion which you have reached according to your research questions which you have framed in objective? That is, you can respond one by one quickly.
Should I answer, sir?
Yeah.
Should I answer? Sir, I have framed the research question so that it can lead systematically to my research. So on the basis of those research questions only, I have dealt with various aspects.
The question asked to you is, what is the difference between a research question and hypothesis? Why have you framed research question? He has not asked.
Okay. So the
The
difference
honorable member is asking the difference between the two. Am I right, sir? Sorry, sir?
Yes, sir. Exactly, sir.
So to my understanding, whether it's a doctrinal or non-doctrinal research required, and both and they are with different objective I have kept in my paper. Research questions have given direction to my research, and hypothesis is based on the assumption that I have framed on the basis of related literature that I have literature review that I have done, and the other studies that I have made.
Okay. My another question, because there is lack of time, so I will not put too many questions. one more question is that did you do content analysis? How did you arrive to the problems faced by the street vendors? What is the source of data?
Okay, so actually I have searched through the various associations which are formed for the purpose of street vendor, the historical background, why this act came into force, and then whatever is the data available with the Ministry of Labor and Employment, and specifically its national association for street
What is the method for content analysis? What kind of analysis you have made to get information available on through associations? What kind of method you have adopted to analyze that data, secondary information, whatever? Because this is a technical session, so just I am asking you, please don't mind.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, sir.
Yeah.
The question is very simple. What is the method you have adopted for data analysis? That is the question.
Yes. Exactly. Sir has simplified it.
Okay, it was explanatory method only, sir. I have whatever was the content available, I have adopted the descriptive and explanatory methodology.
My final suggestion to you, need not to answer. My suggestion is, please revisit your paper. Okay, when you are saying critical analysis, it should be made on the basis of some fact, some method of data analysis by the primary or secondary, and see some more resources also available, and then please fine tune your paper. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Tiwari, for the intervention. We'll now move on to our second speaker, Dr. Shashi Kumar, and his paper is titled Impact of Climate Change on Human Rights, Preparedness and Strategy of India. Dr. Shashi Kumar, over to you.
Yes, sir. I'm audible?
Sir, you are audible.
Audible, sir. Good morning, all of you, sir. Honorable panelists and dignitaries, participants. I am Dr. Shashi Kumar, Associate Professor, Department of Human Rights, Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar University, Lucknow. My paper is on impact of climate change on human rights, the preparedness and strategy of India. I present my PPT here. Allow me to present PPT.
Please go ahead.
Okay, sir. Just a moment, sir.
We would also like to welcome our Vice Chancellor, Professor Balraj Chauhan, to this plenary session. Welcome, sir. You need to unmute, sir. You are muted, sir. Professor Balraj Chauhan, sir, you please unmute.
Thank you very much, Manvin. I welcome my friend, Professor Paramjit Singh Jaiswal, my very close friend, and please continue. I don't want to disturb.
Yes, sir.
Good morning.
I welcome all of you, and please carry on. I'm sorry. Arvind Bhai, namaskar. So nice of you. Yesterday I saw you, but please.
Yes, sir. Should I start?
Yes, please.
Yes, sir. Today we are knowing that whole world is in grip of climate change effect, and we are witnessing in different parts the severe cold, thunderstorm, melting of glacier, and the rising of sea level, flood, drought, and air pollution. And recently, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has warned that world is in the state of climate emergency, where we are finding the rising global temperature is 2 degrees Celsius, and if you are not going to stop it, then we will have a climate catastrophe in the different part of the world. And last year we have witnessed the bushfire in Australia and Amazon in South America. And in this paper, I'm going to analyze the impact of climate change on the human rights of human beings. What is the climate change and how the human rights are affected, and which type of rights are we going to affect much. And for this, I have another slide. Climate change. If you see the seeing the severity of the climate change problem in the world, the United Nations has also taken it seriously, and they have in 2009 the climate. They have made a study on the international recognized human rights, and a report was there by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner of Human Rights, and they have identified that climate change has severely affected the human rights, the enjoyment of the human rights of the people, of the individual, and there are the areas climate change violates the number of the rights like right to life, right to food, right to health, right to water, right to development, right to self-determination, and rights of indigenous people. We all know that if the climate is erratic, there will be a rainfall, there will be flood, and the food agricultural productivity will also go down, and the crisis of food scarcity will be there. It also affected the health because of there are vector-borne diseases there if I have seen in India.
Dr. Shashi, you have retrieved this reference of a Human Rights Commission in 2009. We are in 2021. Don't you think that this data is too old to be referred to now?
Oh, sorry.
No, the previous slide which you are referring to, second point in that.
So this was done by United Nations Human Rights Commission study there.
No, that is all right. I'm not saying, but you are referring to a report of 2009.
Yes, that is there. This is the UN Commission report.
Yeah, continue. You continue further.
These are the human rights which are affected by the climate change I'm talking about. And the indigenous people, who are the native people of different countries, of Aboriginal peoples, and they are much affected by the climate change, this crisis. In the impact of climate change on India. Now coming to India is the fourth largest emitters country among the top 10 emitters, contribute 78% of the global CO2, carbon dioxide. So India is the fourth, US is the first, and China after that. All this, they have the carbon emissions, and India is climate. If you see the Indian subcontinental, the tropical region, and the geographical region, India is a climate vulnerability country because of its psychographic features like large Indian Ocean. We have vast glacier, plateau, desert, low rising hills in south and western border, and because of this, we have seen the abrupt monsoon. Floods are also there, droughts are also there. Frequently, drought we find that tsunami we have seen, rising sea level, adverse impact of the agriculture productivity, water pollution. These are the problem, and we also have an outbreak of the vector-borne diseases in many parts of the country. Even in my state also, we find that the diseases are much there. Diarrhea, cholera, malaria. These are the effect of the climate change crisis, and India government has taken seriously concern on this trend, and when there was a Butland Commission on the 1972, that time also the India government has in 70s, early 70s, they have Stockholm Conference, United Nations Conference on Human Rights, held in 1972. Stockholm inspired, and several central laws were enacted that time also. And for example, these some and more importantly, in the Constitution also, we in the DRPS we have the.
Is it a new abbreviation, DRPS?
No, sorry, sir, it's wrong. Is that's the principle of state policy, sir. So wrong.
No, that we understand. 48 is the DPS, but I am reading this
It's a spelling mistake.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
So states shall endeavor to protect and improve the environment and the safeguard of the forest and the wildlife of the country. And we also have a fundamental duties. It shall be duty of every citizen of India to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife, and to have compensation for living creatures. So already in the Constitution we have the concern for environment in the form of state's responsibility, and also in the form of the citizens' responsibility to protect their rights. Here I want to highlight that in Indian culture also, in tradition also, we have the rituals, customs for the protection of environment. We are living with the nature. We have festivals also which is concerned with the environment. We worship trees, forest also. Our tribal people are worshipping more. They are have their customs. They have. Oh, sorry. These are the laws.
Dr. Shashi, I'll request you to, since you have several slides and we don't have that much time,
okay, sir.
If you can come to your findings, your conclusions, suggestions.
Sir, yes. These are the laws we can read it. These are the laws Indian government has enacted. Then judiciary has also played a very active role, proactive role for the environmental protection, and we have a good number of cases, and we have environmental jurisprudence is very rich here. We have some principles also like public trust doctrine, public pay principles, precautionary principles, principle of absolute liability, principle of sustainable development. These are the principles which were interpreted by the judiciary. And next slide. Coming to the policy. This is the policy. Indian government has shown the stewardship to the protection of climate change, and it committed to communication at 2004 and 2012, and starting from 2008, India government has made a national action plan on climate change and outlining the existing and the future policies and programs addressing the climate mitigation and adaptation at national level. So India government has already made some planning for the mitigation and adaptation of the climate change things. It has 8 core national missions like National Solar Mission, National Mission for Enhanced Energy Efficiency, National Mission on the Sustainable Habitat, Water Mission, Mission for the Sustaining and Himalayan Ecosystem, National Mission for Green India. These are the missions which India government is working on. And beside that, we also have a state action plan for the climate change. 33 states have now identified the climate impact sectors, and they have made there some mitigation and adaptation measures also. And India, during the Paris.
Dr. Shashi, if you could identify the problem and then talk about your suggestions regarding that, because the data available, since we have the paper, we can go through. It has already been circulated with all the panelists. So I would request you to.
India has signed the Paris Agreement, and it has submitted the national determined contribution, and India has committed to reduce the carbon emission intensity of GDP by 33%, 25%, 2030, and 40% power should to reduce the electricity power, and they are based on the renewable energy resources. And for that, India need the 2.5 and the 3 billion tons of some amount they have mentioned. It required $206 billion needed by 2030 for implementation of the policies of the NDC. And India has very much committed for the 35% of the carbon emission reduction. This is very important because India wants to And moreover, India has given this commitment on the basis of the CD. With the,
Dr. Shashi, we also have 3 more presenters, so I would request you to kindly come to your conclusion part.
That's the last point. So what I want to suggest that the NDC by the India is very important, and if we stick to this, adhere to this commitment, I think India will show the world that being a most populated country of the world and also developing country, fulfilling the balancing the both the development, sustainable development of the country, and commitment towards the climate change. I think India can show that with that strategies planning that with development we can also have sustainable development, and we can save the climate, we can save the environment. This is what I want to say. And lastly, I want to give the quotation of the Mahatma Gandhi, who said, "This is what India can want to show. Earth has enough resources to meet people's need, but will never have enough to satisfy people's need." So we have to reduce our greed. If because Earth has given most resources, but if our greed is more, then we will even destroy the nature.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Shashi. Our distinguished panelists and adjudicators, if they have to make any comment on this paper, more welcome.
Dr. Shashi, do you find any change with the election of Joe Biden as the president of US, the climate action plan at the international fora?
Pardon, sir? Just a minute, sir.
Do you find any change with the election of Joe Biden as the president of the America on the international plan of action with the climate change?
Actually, the President Trump has said that he will withdraw from the Paris Agreement, and with this new President Joe Biden, I think he has a hope to join this agreement also, and Joe Biden
has already reversed it. He has already reversed President Trump.
It's already reversed whatever the Trump has done, and he has wanted to sign the agreement. And I think with this new hope is there in the world.
Thank you. Nirmala.
I don't see any magnitude analysis of what is the magnitude of the challenge. And secondly, for instance, I think India has done a lot on the solar part. So what is it that is going to have an impact? Some sort of this thing as to what is the challenge and how much we are able to do and where we are. We don't see that. Can you illustrate that?
Yeah. Dr. Shashi, I have couple of suggestions. One is that you have to restructure paper in a proper research kind of paper. Number one, operational definition is not there. Operational definition, like what do you mean by human rights? What is the climate change? For readers, it should be very clear. Number two, what are the objectives of your paper? Because paper cannot talk everything. You have to specify the paper to certain objectives. What kind of methodology you have adopted? Any secondary data have you collected? And as Professor Jaswal has said, the report should be, you may refer the earlier report also, but the data should be given latest, which is available in the public domain from various sources. And my last question also to you to respond and consider for final preparation of your paper. Could you, because you have said impact, what is the impact on various stakeholders? For example, what is the impact on farmers on this? Like drought is there. What is the gender kind of, gender perspective may also be there. Because women have to go to face the water far away, 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers. I mean, how climate change is also clear. Of course, you have analyzed the right, how the rights violation is happening. But if you can also specify the impact on few stakeholders, that would be better. If you have any answer, you can answer this. Otherwise, you can consider for your finalization of your paper. Thank you.
Here I want to say that I have not studied any scientific data or scientific study on this climate change, but whatever I have read from secondary sources, that of course that climate change has impacted the food.
Dr. Shashi, I don't want to answer right now. What I'm saying, any paper should be very written in a logical manner. It should say something in the end of the paper. So what do you want to convey the message to the future researchers? That's all. You can consider for revision of the paper when you are publishing it.
Okay, I will do it. I will do it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shashi Kumar. I would now request our next presenter, Ms. Jane Vinita Peter. Correct me if I have not correctly pronounced your name. She'll be talking about victim rehabilitation in India, miles to go. Ms. Peter.
Honorable Vice Chancellor, respected panelists, dignitaries, and other participants, good morning to you all. My paper is on victim rehabilitation in India, miles to go. I'll be making a PowerPoint presentation. My paper is on victim rehabilitation, and to introduce myself before, I am Jean Vinita Peter, Assistant Professor, School of Legal Studies, Cochin University of Science and Technology. My paper is based on the premise that the term victim rehabilitation is thoroughly misunderstood. There is a lot of ambiguity involving the concept of victim rehabilitation. The victim, though the victim is an active component of the criminal justice system, the victim is often a forgotten figure in the criminal justice process. Though the victim, it is a victim that sets the criminal law in motion. Thereafter, the victim goes into oblivion. We know that there's much national and international concern regarding safeguarding the rights of the accused, but little attention is being paid to the rights of the victim. Now, we have the United Nations Declaration of Basic Principles of Justice for Victims of Crime and Abuse of Power, which was adopted in 1985. It was subsequent to the adoption of this declaration that the Indian criminal justice system has started to respond to the needs of the victim. Consequently, some minimal rights have been introduced in the criminal procedural law relating to victims. The UN Declaration provides for some generic entitlements for victims. Coming to the victim rights in India, the Justice Malimat Committee, which was constituted by the government to consider measures to revamp the criminal justice system, has strongly espoused the idea of justice to victims. Amendments were brought to the criminal procedure law in 2005, 2006, and 2008. The Criminal Law Amendment Acts of 2008 and 2013 has brought about a paradigm shift in the criminal justice system by redefining the rights of the victims. The criminal procedural law defines a victim as a person who has suffered loss or injury caused by act or omission for which the accused has been charged, which also includes his or her guardian or legal heir. The Criminal Law Amendment Act of 2009 has introduced the proviso to Section 24, subsection 8 of the Criminal Procedure Code, which grants the victim the right to engage an advocate of his choice to assist the prosecution. And also, it has also introduced the proviso to Section 372 of the Criminal Procedure Code, which grants the victim the right to prefer appeal against order of acquittal of accused or conviction for lesser offense or imposing inadequate compensation. Coming to victims of sexual offenses, as we all know, rape is unique among crimes in the sense that it degrades and humiliates the victim, and more so where the victim is a helpless, innocent child, it leaves behind a traumatic experience. The Criminal Law Amendment Act of 2013, as we all know, which came in the background of the Justice Verma Committee recommendations in the background of the Delhi rape case, is one of the most concrete steps which has been taken by the government to curb violence against women. The Act has made out new offenses in the Indian Penal Code, namely voyeurism and stalking. Consequently, related provisions were also introduced in the criminal procedural law. Coming to the international legal framework, again, as we have already seen, the Declaration of Basic Principles of Justice for Victims of Crime and Abuse of Power is the main document and the international scenario, which it recognizes that victims of crime and victims of abuse of power, their families, witnesses, and others who assist them are unjustly subject to loss, damage, or injury and suffer hardships when assisting the prosecution. The declaration spells out the rights of victims in the criminal justice process, ranging from right to be informed of the of the proceedings, right to express their views and concerns, right to proper assistance throughout the legal process, right to guard their privacy and ensure their safety, and the right to smooth justice process, to treat the victim. Now, coming to the salient features of the UN Declaration. Some of the salient features are to treat the victim with compassion and respect for his or her dignity, to access the courts of justice for prompt redressal, expeditious, fair, and accessible procedure for judicial and administrative redressal, expressing his or her views and concern to be considered at the appropriate stage, proper assistance throughout the legal process, prompt disposition of cases and execution of orders, fair restitution, financial compensation by the state when it is not fully available from the offender, necessary medical, material, psychological, and social assistance through governmental, voluntary, or community basis. And also the declaration underlines the state's obligation to ensure access for victims of crime to justice and fair treatment, restitution, and compensation. Now, coming to the definition of a victim under the declaration. The declaration defines a victim to include persons who have individually or collectively suffered harm, including physical or mental injury, emotional suffering, economic loss, or substantial impairment of fundamental rights through acts or omissions that are in violation of criminal laws, including laws prescribing criminal abuse of power. The UN Declaration, interestingly, recognizes a person as a victim irrespective of whether the perpetrator is identified, apprehended, prosecuted, or convicted. And the declaration enumerates 4 broad principles, namely access to justice and fair treatment, restitution, compensation, and assistance. Just to have a quick analysis of the protection of victim rights in other legal systems. In the United States, we have the Crime Victims Act of 1984 which established the Crime Victims Fund as a funding source for victim services throughout the country. Each state administers a crime victim compensation program for providing financial assistance to victims of both federal and state crimes. In the United Kingdom has enacted the Criminal Justice Act of 1988, which makes provisions for payment of compensation by the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board. A special legislation called the Code of Practice for Victims of Crime sets out the services that the victim can receive from the criminal justice agencies like the police and the Crown Prosecution Service. Access to justice, with regard to access to justice and fair treatment, which is the first principle under the UN Declaration. In tune with this principle, some minimal rights have been conferred on the victim under criminal procedural law. As we have already seen, Section 24, subsection 8, whereby the victim is permitted to engage a lawyer of his choice to assist the prosecution, as also Sections 374, subsections 2 and 3, where the victim has a right to prefer appeal against order of acquittal or conviction for a lesser offense or against inadequate compensation. Coming to the compensation jurisprudence of victims in India, Article 41 of the Directive Principles of State Policy under the Constitution enjoins the state to secure the right to public assistance in case of disablement and other cases of undeserved want. The fundamental duties under Article 51A(g) of the Constitution lays down the duty to have compassion for living creatures and to develop humanism respectively. In Rudal Shah versus State of Bihar, the Supreme Court has interpreted the right to life and personal liberty under Article 21 to include right to compensation as being an integral part of the right to life. Section 357 of the Criminal Procedural Law empowers the court to impose a sentence of fine or a sentence of which fine forms a part in its discretion inter alia to order payment of compensation out of fine recovered to person for loss or injury caused to him by the offense. Under Section 357, subsection 3, the court is empowered to award compensation for loss or injury suffered by a person, even in cases where fine does not form a part of the sentence. Coming to in this context, let me say that the Indian judiciary has made a remarkable contribution in the context of protection of victim rights. In Balraj versus State, the Supreme Court has held that the power to award compensation is not ancillary to other sentence, but it is in addition thereto. The victim's right to get justice is paramount and separate from the issue of punishment of the offender. In Dr. Jacob George versus State of Kerala, the Supreme Court has held that victims have a right to get justice to remedy the harm suffered as a result of crime. This right is different from and independent of the right to retribution, responsibility of which is assumed by the state in a society governed by rule of law. In Sarwan Singh versus State of Punjab, the Supreme Court has pointed out that in cases found to be warranting the award of compensation, the capacity of the accused to pay would have to be taken note of, because if the accused is unable to pay the fine out of his resources, the purpose behind the order would remain unserved. Again, in Ankush Gaikwad versus State of Maharashtra, the court stressed on the mandatory duty on the court to apply its mind to the question of compensation in every criminal case as a standard practice. Coming to the victim compensation schemes under the criminal procedural law, the victim compensation scheme under Section 357A was introduced by the Criminal Procedure Amendment Act of 2009, and the responsibility of creating and maintaining the fund for the purpose is imposed on the states. The District Legal Services Authority and the State Legal Services Authority is authorized to decide the quantum of compensation to be awarded to the victims subject to the maximum limit prescribed by the state. In addition to the payment of compensation, Section 357A attempts to respond to the immediate needs of the victim for first aid or medical benefits as well as other interim relief. One of the major drawbacks of the victim compensation scheme under Section 357A is the absence of proper guidelines in fixing the quantum of compensation. When it comes to other rights of rehabilitation of the victims, here, the right to seek compensation for injuries suffered accrues only at the end of the trial. So often the victims are in need of immediate assistance when the fatality caused by the crime leaves the defendant in a helpless situation. Thus, victim assistance is an integral part of victim rehabilitation. The Justice Malimat Committee has rightly recommended the need for a victim support service coordinator who can work closely with the police and the courts to monitor, coordinate, and ensure delivery of justice during the pendency of the case. As a conclusion, I would say that since the adoption of the UN Declaration, the Indian criminal justice has made a major headway in recognizing victim rights, apart from the right to compensation provided under Sections 357, 357A, 357B, 357C, and 358 of the Criminal Procedure Code, and certain other minimal procedural rights which are introduced at the time of trial. The Indian criminal justice system still needs to travel a long way in enhancing victim satisfaction. The term rehabilitation assumes importance in the light of new offenses in the Indian Penal Code, like causing grievous hurt by acid attack and gang rape. Going by the provisions of Section 357A of the Criminal Procedure Code, it leads to the inference that the victims are sought to be rehabilitated in terms of monetary compensation. It is here that we need to understand the real import of the term rehabilitation, which means all assistance, including physical, social, emotional, and psychological support to the victim, render necessary medical services, facilitate counseling, not only for the victims, but for the family members too, offer vocational training to the victims in need, and to take all possible measures to enable the victim to assimilate to the mainstream of the society. Rehabilitation of the victim becomes complete, effective, and meaningful only when the state discharges its obligation to ensure the security and safety of the victim and his or her family. And for this, the state needs to recognize the role played by non-state actors as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peter, for this elaborate presentation on victim rehabilitation. Recently, I came across 2-3 Delhi High Court judgments wherein I was very happy to see that the court has actually asked an academic, especially the then Registrar of NLU Delhi, to act as amicus, especially from the point in respect of victim rehabilitation. You must have seen those judgments, and in the intervention of Professor Bajpayee, another administrator of Sagar University. So, Nirmala ma'am has raised her hand, and if she has to make.
Yeah, I think you have very well discussed the victim rehabilitation issue and how it is progressing now, which was not there. But we are limited to the victim defined in the CRPC. But there are other programs, if you like, provisions of compensation under law relating to industrial disasters like and Public Liabilities Insurance Act, National Green Tribunal Act, and civil liabilities for nuclear damages. I mean, so we are limited, but where we are limited, we are described well. And Sameshwari has sort of pointed out what this is there. But I think these also need to be covered, or you spell out that this you have not covered so far, because that is also important, like claims tribunals and all that. There have also been Green Tribunal, Civil Liberties, Nuclear Damage Act. They also have to be covered, because you are right that the victim rehabilitation has miles to go. There was no concept at all. The victim is also important. That we have well said. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, Professor Jaswal wants to make a point. Yes, sir.
Vanita,
Yes,
my two observations. Firstly, do you find any distinction between restorative justice and victim rehabilitation?
So restorative justice, as far as I've understood the concept and from my reading, what I've understood is it is a mediation between the accused and the victim. I mean, the offender and the victim. And in our criminal justice system, I would opine that it is not a feasible method. Victim restorative justice is hard to work in the Indian criminal justice system. But victim rehabilitation, of course, it takes a wider import in the sense that, as I've pointed out, sir, it is not be confined. Yes, sir.
You refer to section 357A of the CRPC.
Yes, sir.
The 357 and 357A of the CRPC you refer to.
Yes, sir.
Now, those sections, they are not a mediation section only. They talk about a rehabilitation also to a great extent.
Yes, sir. Sir, I would humbly submit, sir, because my understanding is that even though they have specifically stated.
It's a suggestion.
Yes,
I take a clue from Professor Tiwari, who in earlier cases also very nicely you can read a little more on restorative justice and then reshape your paper. But
Yes,
I'm more worried about in your paper reference to certain provision which you refer to 51 AG.
Yes, sir.
You go to the slide and how do you refer it to victim rehabilitation for 51 AG?
It refers to the duty to treat your fellow companions with true humanism.
No, it's basically for protection of environment. If you see in the total or the compassion for the living creature, the language is, it is a fundamental duty of every citizen to protect and improve the natural environment, including, it's an inclusive definition.
Okay, sir.
Including forest, lakes, river, wildlife, and have compassion to living creature in that context in which the definition is there. So do you include the victims there in this definition?
Sir, perhaps that was a wrong interpretation on my part, sir.
Similarly, you have
read it in isolation.
No. You see, when you are you are a law teacher, you are referring to a provision. The provision should not be, if I can take the liberty of saying, manipulating to your suitability. You have to interpret the provision as it. You can give a new interpretation that is not there, but that new interpretation, Supreme Court has given so many new interpretation to so many provisions, but those interpretations should be conducive to the context in which they are to be interpreted. Similarly, you are talked about Article 41 of the Constitution.
Yes, sir.
You read the context of the Article 41 of the Constitution. You will come to know of that, to what extent you can use it for victim rehabilitation. See, and when you talked about a judicial attitude, you refer to Rudra Shah. That was the beginning, no doubt. Rudra Shah is it is positively interpreted because the beginning was made there by the Supreme Court, but it is a subject to criticism that it only gave interim compensation of 35 lakhs to a person who is languishing in jail for 14 years without any fault, and left him to that for claiming regular compensation and rehabilitation, you can move to the court independently. So that's a criticism of that judgment. And you never refer to the unique judgment on this count of victim compensation, or the Nilamati Behera case. Nilabati Behera versus State of Odisha, 1993 Supreme Court. That is the unique case because in that they said that the Supreme Court of India relied on international convention and say when there is a violation of fundamental right, even the respondent need not to be the state within the definition of Article 12, and the writ under Article 32 can lie before the Supreme Court. That's a unique interpretation. So when you are culling out something from the judicial attitude, you should refer to those cases where there is some unique interpretation. But Sarban Singh case, the Balaji case, other cases, they are all in a rhetoric manner followed the law laid down by the Supreme Court. But the Nilabati Behera laid down the law, which was not in existence. Rudra Shah laid down the law, but then you could have critically analyzed that. That yes, that was the beginning, that is why we appreciate, but the court could have moved a little distance to cover that distance of a mile.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes,
I think that's my observation, which you can take note in the
Yes,
in future. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Jane,
Thank you.
quickly, my very few observations because
Yes, sir.
time is an issue, but still I cannot prevent myself to suggest you few things, 2-3 things.
Yes, sir.
Your paper covers, because it's a huge area, victim rehabilitation. Which kind of victims? Because victimology, you are seeing victim of all kind of victim, like crime victims or victim of sexual offenses or victims of domestic violence or victims of torture or custodial violence. Which kind of victims you are talking to? Because in one paper, one researcher cannot talk everything. So please specify scope of your paper, which victim you are talking about, and then come whatever has been suggested by Professor Jaswal also. And also you say like rehabilitation. Which kind of rehabilitation you are talking? Only compensation to the victims, or social rehabilitation, or psychological rehabilitation? What rehabilitation you are talking about? Please specify this. Okay.
Yes,
And
sir.
third thing is this: like there is one judgment, state of Gujarat versus Honorable High Court of Gujarat.
Yeah, that's very important.
What Professor Jaswal has said that you see, like this is a restorative kind of approach which the Honorable Court has given in this judgment, that the you see convict would be in jail, who will be in the jail, would be working, and he will be getting the wages for that.
Wages.
So the wage should be deducted and should be given to the victims of crime. So this is the restorative justice approach. So which is also, you see, giving support to the victim, economic support, some. So please revisit and fine-tune your paper and
Yes, sir.
specify the scope and some methodology. What are your objectives? What are you talking to? You cannot talk everything victimology in one paper. So these are my observations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments, our distinguished panelists. We'll now be moving to our next presenter, Mr. Karan. Yeah, Nirmala.
Yeah, just add one more point to her. You know, there's one more aspect of victim rehabilitation. All the time, the victim is under pressure, particularly sexual offenses and other cases, to change. And that
Yes.
affects his reputation and everything. So, because I once did a criminal justice system mapping in Madhya Pradesh, I found that in a number of places the victims are under tremendous pressure to compromise and not come, and then that prejudiced the court and also affected her and his rehabilitation. So you might like to look at it when you are looking at it.
Very, very valid point.
Yes.
Especially since you also referred to rape cases. My father is a practitioner at district court level, and he tells me several instances wherein the victim has actually been pressurized to marry the person whom she accused of rape.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
So our next presenter is Mr. Karan Godara, and his paper is titled "Failure to Recognize Individuals Displaced Due to Climate Change as Refugees: A Serious Human Rights Issue." Karan, I would request you if you can complete your presentation in 10 minutes,
Sure.
and then allow our panelists to intervene. Thank you.
Sure. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Just give me a second. Let me just set up the screen. Sharing. Is my screen visible?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Now?
Yes.
Is it visible now? Yes, it is. Right. Okay. I'll be talking about individuals who have been displaced due to climate change. Now, the idea may seem far-fetched right now because right now there is not much talk about it. I mean, physically we do not see much impact, but it is not a future hypothetical. It is something. It is a phenomena that is occurring today.
Karan, if you could just introduce yourself.
Sorry, I'm Karan Kudara, and I am a research scholar at Punjab University. And I'm done with 4 years of research. I'm working on the International Criminal Court, and this is something of interest to me. And the pandemic, if I'm talking about my topic, because of the pandemic, the current situation we are in, it clearly marks out that we need to be ready for unprecedented situations. And just to introduce briefly that temperatures are rising, and there is no doubt about it. There are targets that have been set, but we are failing to meet those targets. The UNEP in the emissions gap report again in 2020, and even earlier it has stated that we are not meeting the 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius target, and we are reaching to about a catastrophic 3 degrees. And climate change is not. We have to, once we are looking at persons displaced due to climate change, we are not looking at it can act in two ways. It can either be an independent threat. For example, what is happening in countries like island countries like Kiribati, and it is estimated. Now, these are figures from the United Nations. This is the population growth. If you look at 1800, we were just 1 billion people on the planet, and we are rising exponentially. And within 300 years, we are expected to reach about 11.2 billion people, and out of which 2 billion would be 2 billion would be climate change refugees. Now, this is a very startling figure because right now we have 80 million asylum seekers and 26 million refugees at the moment because of other factors. And it is also a threat multiplier. If you look at the Darfur region of Sudan, there was a conflict and a lot of people died. It's a genocide which the ICC is looking into. And many people, 1.6 million people were displaced. Now, these are also internally displaced persons and also those that had to take refuge in neighboring Chad. So these are the figures. And there is a growing asylum seekers sentiment. Now, this is visible from the Australian study. And also in United Kingdom is also planning to come up with a similar plan. And these were offshore detention centers. So people arriving by boat, asylum seekers arriving by boat, were put in offshore centers, and for years on end, they have been taught. They were living in punitive conditions. So this is an issue which is rising, and we need to be careful of this, the growing sentiment. And now there is an urgency of recognizing climate change refugees. Now, firstly, I would like to point out here that climate change refugees is misguided as a nomenclature, because refugee is any person who has been defined in accordance with Article 1 of 1951 Convention. So there has to be a fear of persecution. He must be in a foreign country, shouldn't be an internally displaced person. And there are certain factors which are taken into account to see if the persecution is real or not. These are race, religion, nationality. So climate change refugees, currently it is misguided. We can call them displaced persons, but as long as they do not get official recognition, they cannot be called refugees. Now, this is the principle of non-refoulement. Now, this has become a part of customary international law, as has already been stated also by the International Red Cross in the IHL books and elsewhere. Everywhere it is clearly stated that it is part of customary law. It is part of Article 33 Refugee Convention, but it goes beyond that, being part of customary law, and it has also become part of human rights law. And this is visible from, if you look at the ICCPR general comment, prepared by the Human Rights Committee, again, it says that where there is a irreparable harm to the person. So this can be under Article 6, which is inherent right to life. And in the Kiribati case, now this is a judge. This is 2019 order, and this is by the Human Rights Committee. And this is in this case, basically, a family was staying in New Zealand and they were seeking refuge there on the basis of climate change in Kiribati. Now, this is a country, island country, which is estimated to submerge in the next 7 to 10 years. So it was held that obligation of non-refoulement is also valid under human rights law, and it is much wider. So if somebody is facing not merely persecution on the basis of the 1951 convention, but also if there is a threat to life, imminent threat to life, which is obviously there in the case of climate change. So they have a right to be treated fairly by the country where they are seeking rehabilitation. Although in this case, it was the family was asked to go back because the court said that there is still time where the countries can salvage the situation and climate change can still be, since there are 10-15 years before the country will submerge. Now, climate change refugees is again, it is an emerging category. And as I've already stated earlier, that 1.6 billion to 2 billion from 2060 to 2 billion in to 2100. And Darfur's desertification. So what happened in Darfur was first, the conflict occurred later. People were always, the conflict was between Arabs and the other local tribes. Now they have been living peacefully for many years on end, but after Darfur faced desertification, there was a resource crunch that led to conflict. So it is acting as a threat multiplier. So not only does climate change sow the seeds for conflict, but it also makes displacement worse. And this is an example where it is clear that countries have, like, for example, the New Zealand Pacific Access Category Program is rehabilitating 250 persons per year because of climate change. But this is a very minuscule number. So this is like a lottery system. A few people get this opportunity, others don't. And again, this can lead to, climate change can lead to a Gaussian moment in international law, which is something that has already occurred in the international criminal law, in the post-Cold World War II phase, when there was a sudden onset of rules. If we talk about crimes against humanity or we talk about crimes against peace, and there was a sudden onset of rules which was not present earlier. So it can lead to a Gaussian moment when this will happen for climate change refugees as well, because currently countries are not doing anything for this. Now, these are the greenhouse gas emissions. Now, this is basically to cover my suggestions. So right now, if you look at the greenhouse gas emissions of various countries, if you compare the developing countries and the developed countries, so this data is from the time of industrialization. And up till 2004, you can see that this group of 8 countries, developed countries, had contributed 61% of greenhouse gas emissions, and developing nations, five nations, were at 13%. But if you if you juxtapose these figures with the countries which are hosting maximum refugees, you will see that the developed countries are hosting 86% of the refugees, and developing countries are hosting only 14 countries of the refugees. And right now, we are not even considering those displaced because of climate change, because they are not considered as refugees. And secondly, the problem is coming up. It is not an immediate threat in the next 5-10 years, but it is something that is beginning to emerge. And if you're not being able to even take care of the current framework of refugee law, then it is very difficult to look after more people who are going to have to move away from their home in the future. Now, even the European refugee policy is inequitable. They've made an attempt to obviously to cater to refugees, but again, it was inequitable because they said that wherever the person enters first, that country will be responsible. So this is inequitable because now Syrian refugees crossing the Mediterranean into Greece first entered Greece, and then they all will be responsible. Greece will be responsible for all. So it becomes an issue because one country cannot take care of so many refugees, and this is what leads to excessive strain. For example, Syrian refugees again concentrating in just 3 neighboring countries. Turkey is the world's largest. Turkey hosts the world's largest refugees currently at 3.6 million, and right now of Syrian refugees, only 3 countries are majorly looking after them. Darfur region, again, they decided to go to neighboring Chad, so just one country mostly. And impact of the 1971, if you look at the East Pakistan crisis, which led to the war, again, 10 million refugees were hosted by India. Rohingya.
Karan, if you could also conclude while
Right.
giving your suggestions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So again, so in conclusion, I would just like to say that there are 2 suggestions. Firstly, we need a framework for climate change refugees. Now, this can be either inculcated in the current scenario, in the current framework by adding an additional protocol, or a new convention to define them. And we need to cover both. The definition needs to be wide to cover displacements independently, as in the case of Kiribati, and also as a threat multiplier, as in the case of Darfur region of Sudan. And secondly, this needs to be an equitable responsibility sharing inter-country formulation. And of course, there is an ecological debt owed by the industrialized countries, so they must take responsibility. And cumulative data from 1850 onwards should first be seen as to anthropogenic climate change, which countries are most responsible, and on that basis, the responsibility must be shared on the number of persons to be taken care of by each country. And it is a dynamic process, since the greenhouse gas emissions change each year. Up till 2006, US was the leader. Now China is. And again, we need a globalized response, as is clear from the coronavirus pandemic, that a globalized context is needed to the issue, and not merely a regional one. Right.
Thank you, Karan. Our experts are welcome for interventions.
I think we are running shortage of time. We skip over it.
Okay, sir. Thank you. If Professor Tiwari has to make any comment.
Nothing, but only this. I want to ask, what is the methodology in your paper?
Methodology, yes.
Sort of methodology.
Sorry, sir. I've referred to secondary data. I've taken into account all reports from the United Nations and other credible sources, and this is entirely based on proper data. And
Fine. Yeah.
Thank you, Karan. Yeah, Nirmala.
Yeah, just a point that I think in the whole presentation, and perhaps naturally, there is a mixture of climate change and political responsibility.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
the countries all there. I think that's a point to be noted. That's all.
Right.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Karan.
Thank you.
We'll now have our last presenter, Ms. Vaishnavi Nilkant Pillai, and she'll be presenting her paper on is sustainable development a vanishing concept in the present era. So, welcome, Ms. Vaishnavi, and you may.
So, am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. And this is me, Vaishnavi Neelahandipillai, and I'm from the southern tip of India. That's a Kanyakumari. And I was in US before moving to my hometown and I moved like a few months back. And the reason why I chose this topic, that is sustainable development, a vanishing concept, is because I always feel that in the name of development, we are forgetting something.
Vaishnavi, if you could also introduce yourself, your affiliation with the organization or institution.
So currently I'm not working. I'm just making preparations for my PhD, and I'm just thinking whether I should work or I should go for my higher studies.
Okay.
That's the thing. That is why.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. So let me go on to the topic. The reason why I chose this topic is because I feel like in the name of development, the sustainability is being vanished, because in the name of development, we are destroying a lot of things like nature, which is a very basic thing. So sustainable development to me is actually a balance between the nature and the development. With your permission, let me share my PowerPoint. I'm sorry for delay. Can I, sir?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. The net is kind of slow. Just give me a minute. I'm not able to share.
Don't be under stress. Don't be under stress.
Vaishnavi, I can share it if needed.
Ma'am,
I can share
it,
it.
ma'am.
Yes. Sure. It is
Thank you,
opening.
ma'am.
Give me a moment.
Yeah, sure.
Is it audible? Is it visible now?
It's coming as, it's getting. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes. Thank you, Veena.
So the first slide, can I move on to the next slide, ma'am? Like after my intro. So this is where I have pointed out, like, it is actually a clash between the conservation of nature and development. So what are we going to preserve? Is it the nature, or what are we going to enhance? Is it the development? And let me move on to the next slide. The reason which I have, to me, I always believe that ancient traditions and technologies have been way far ahead than what we are using now. The first picture is where you can see a temple and the Vivekananda rock behind, which is obviously my native place. And the next picture is actually a resort from Kanyakumari. So when the tsunami hit in 2004, it is surprising that people who were inside the Kanyakumari Devi temple, they were not at all harmed, and the water couldn't enter even a bit inside the temple. Whereas the other resorts and the people who were standing out on the beach and who were like very near to the beach resorts or somewhere, they were really hurt, and some have lost their life. So my question here is, have we really advanced to that level? In those days where we don't have Google or map or navigation or anything, how come our ancestors were able to build a temple which is very near to the ocean? And in fact, I have learned from my geography lessons that Kanyakumari is a deciding point for all the monsoons in India, which has sustained a lot of storms, which has sustained a lot of hurricanes and everything. So have we come up to that level? To me, I would say seriously no, because these temples, these architectural buildings have stood up for ages, as we all know. So sustainable development in old days, there was that they were following without being put up in the papers. And let me move on to the next slide, ma'am, please. Yeah, this is what I just pointed out for the legislations and laws and cases, because we all of us know that there are a lot of cases and there are a lot of rules and regulations and the international conventions and everything. But 99%, it's very sad to say that 99% have been only in papers and very few have been implemented. At this juncture, let me put up the latest case, that is the Delhi air pollution case. Have we really followed what, even after the aftermath of what happened in the air pollution case? Now, the next slide, please. So this is the situation. I've not been to Delhi, but I've seen them in the news and everything. So this is the situation. Way ahead in the MC Mehta series in 1991, the court laid down strict regulations for the air pollution in Delhi, but we have not followed. Even after 26 years, in November 11, 2017, there was this great smoke of Delhi. Even after that, we didn't follow. But in 25th November 2019, when the air level dropped to the safe, like just against the safety level of 100, the government, the court has to intervene, and they have laid on the strict regulations. But these strict regulations and orders have still not yet been followed, and it's just been in papers, because this article was written a year ago, and I was looking after that time, and I was looking also to this time. I'm pretty not sure they have not implemented any of these things, like at least 60% of the rules. If I'm wrong, please correct me up. And let me move on to the next slide. This is the anti-sterilite protest. It happened in Thoothukudi, which is almost like few kilometers from my hometown. This is where the Vedanta group of industries have constructed a chemical plant, and this chemical plant started emitting chemicals which causes the groundwater depletion, and also which causes a serious harm to the environment. I remember when I was in my college days, while driving to Rameshwaram in the midnight, it was all filled with smoke and everything. I was just asking my father, is it because of the climate? Is it because of very cold or something like that? And Dad told me that it is the emission from the factory that is being surrounded by this. trust me, at least till 5 to 6 kilometers, the smoke was there. And just imagine, as a passerby, I felt this much. But what would be the condition of the people who are living there? That is where these protests happen. And this protest shook the government, the Tamil Nadu government, and they were forced to favor the people. And several people have laid down their lives for this protest. And they were tagged as like they were against the government and everything. But even now, I would say that this protest is a successful one after a lot of lives, because in the Vedanta group of industries have moved to the Supreme Court against the order of the Tamil Nadu government, saying that they should open the factory. But the Supreme Court and the Tamil Nadu government are very strict that they will not let this down, and they will follow what the National Green Tribunal has ordered for. Well, we all know that somewhere in 2010 or 2011, there was a fight against Vedanta by the Dongoria tribes in Odisha. Even that was not a successful cup of coffee for the Vedanta group of industries. This is one example. And the next one, ma'am, next slide, please. This is a hydrocarbon project it is being held at the Delta region, and Neduvasil is one of the places. That Delta region meant the Kaveri Delta region in the Tanjore districts. There, they actually constructed some gas pipes and the pumps, and they converted the fields into the hydrocarbon thing with the support of ONGC. So what happened is people started protesting. It is one of the most fertile regions in the entire state, and almost the most fertile regions in the whole country. And and as a result of the protest, this project is still under stake. My question to them is, by destroying the paddy field, by destroying what you eat, how are you going to enjoy the benefits of hydrocarbon? So it is not like you just construct a gas farm, or you just penetrate something deep inside the earth and destroy the rocks and everything, and then you extract the gas. There are easiest ways of producing hydrocarbons. Say, for example, the methane gas, which is being produced by storing of cow dungs, which is being used in the traditional ways in ancient homes and everything for cooking food and everything. And another way is, a very easiest way, which is feasible nowadays, is storing of waste. India is one of the largest producers of waste in the world. And like, we have produced tons and tons of waste every minute, every second. Store them up in a biogas plant. And by storing up, we'll have a lot of methane gas being produced, and those wastes can be recycled. And also on the other hand, it is not only the waste, but also there are certain types of bacteria which actually eat those waste. And those bacteria are not harmful to the environment. That is, why not let's implement these cost-effective procedures rather than going behind lakhs and crores of projects, which is like really highly which is really a very costliest one. Can I move on to the next slide, ma'am, please? This image is actually is a image clicked in boreal forest in Canada. It's in the North McFurry, and it is nothing but other than the pipeline which is created for the Alberta mining issues. On the surface, you cannot find any pipelines, but inside you could find a lot of other pipelines and other infrastructures below the ground, which is being constructed for enhancing the future and infrastructures of Alberta mining. Here, a lot of indigenous people the tribe who is living around the area have been affected, and their lives are being under question mark. They are being exposed to severe hazards, and they're also being exposed to a lot of other issues like their livelihood and everything. And I was reading somewhere in National Geographic saying that to produce 1 barrel of oil, they take around 3 barrels of water from the Albaska River, which is running through that forest. And on the other hand, I was seeing an image which I don't want to share. There was a lady who was crying near to the body of a stillborn child. What did that unborn child do? Just because she was born in that particular tribe, who was trying their best to protect their forest. For us, we people from urban, it is just like forest is just a green carpet. It is just a carpet where it is filled with trees, and we are like, oh my God, what are the beautiful scenes that we are going through. But for them, it is a treasure. They worship. Even if we ask them to get benefited from the monetary things that comes up from the forest, they would say no. In the name of development, we are actually destroying all those things. And another issue is the Amazon thing, which I've not pointed out here. And the basic thing is, like, we all know that every day or every year, I may be wrong, around 15 to 17% of the Amazon forest is being destroyed. It's a well-known fact that Amazon forest is one of the best oxygen providers in the world. Those people are trying their level best to protect their forest, their treasure. They're not only fighting for themselves, they are also fighting for ourselves. And in the name of development, we are actually losing ourselves. Like, there is in case of Canada, there is nothing to be surprised that Canada is one of the richest countries in the world. And there is also a fact that it is one of the third largest oil mining industry in the world, next to Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. But what are they going to gain? I read somewhere that it was an author who pointed out that they had a goal of reducing the greenhouse emissions. But last year, they actually achieved the goal of increasing greenhouse emission. So what is actually aimed is straight reverse to what has happened in reality. To me, I know development is very much necessary and it is a need of the hour. Why not we switch on to the renewable source of energy? Ma'am, to the next slide, please. There are a lot of countries, like I really admire Germany, Denmark, Netherlands. There are a lot of countries which use renewable source of energy. We get energy from the solar, the sun, the wind, and other forms. Why not we use them? Why should we drill our Mother Earth? We worship them. We say as Bhumi Mata or something like that in our religion and tradition. In that case, we should not hurt them, right? So that is my point. It's not like you put in your verses of prayers, and it is not like you put it in your papers or something like that. Let's make it possible, because now through the technological advancement, let's recycle those things. Let's all get into, like in Japan, they developed a bacteria.
Vaishnavi, kindly keep an eye on the watch also.
Sure, sir. I'll just finish up within 3 minutes at the maximum, not more than that. Is that okay, sir?
Yeah, fine.
Thank you, sir. So in Japan, they created a bacteria called Legionella sacchinensis. I'm sorry for the pronunciation, and it was capable of breaking down and consuming the plastic, poly as a sole carbon and energy source. So why not let's utilize all those things rather than hurting or like creating a permanent scar on Mother Earth?
Vaishnavi, you have made a point. Instead of explaining the same point, you can move on to the next point to save the time. You have made a point that we should make use of alternate sources of energy. That's all.
Yes, sir.
Or renewable sources of energy.
So,
explanation, we understand.
Yes, sir. So this is what I would like to conclude. Rather than going for development in the form of like technological advancement and everything, let's be the turtle who is winning the race. Let's not be the rabbit who runs fast and loses the race. That is what I would like to conclude, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Vaishnavi.
Thank you, sir.
The floor is again open for our expert panelists. And yeah, ma'am, you need to unmute yourself. Nirmala ma'am, unmute yourself, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, actually, your paper title was Sustainable Development with Benefit Consent. I think it's more a question of what sort of development which will have a sustainable development and all that. Because what you pointed out basically what is not being done. But it is possible to have development with sustainability. It's possible to what route you choose.
Yes.
So that's really the focus. So to that extent, it's not applied because there are different interest groups. So that's what has to be tackled. I think that should be the position.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. And since this was also our last paper, also are there any legal process backing?
Yeah, I have two suggestions.
Sir?
Yeah, please.
One is I would like to ask you, what is the source of your data that you have to clearly spell out?
So while I was penning down this article, I was in US, so I was working in a school, so I was utilizing the materials which I was available in the library. and the internet, and of course I get updated from them.
Anyway, you take note of this. I don't want to answer right now. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Number two is this. Have you made any attempt at renewable energy, solar energy in India? How it is impacting? I mean, this is more rhetoric kind of thing. You have to make little applicable on the basis of the work which has been done in the country. And how are we leading? It cannot be stopped. Just yes, we have to preserve the ecological balance, environmental balance, but sustainable development is necessary. So the efforts made by the country, for example, as a case study, if you can give some kind of success stories or some kind of, you see, adverse impact, that would
Yes, I do have one. Can I share with your permission?
kind of thing, just collecting information from secondary sources and put into a form of paper. That's all. I think when you will review your paper for publication, you please take note on these things. Thank you.
With your permission, can I share one success story if you don't mind?
No, but I don't know. We don't have time.
Right
No
now, we
problem,
don't have time.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
I would request our expert panelists if they have any comment to make about the papers or the human rights issue in general.
Well, I think because we have already crossed 16 minutes to the allotted time, we refrain ourselves. We have been making some suggestion appropriate,
Yes,
at
yes.
least from my side.
Definitely.
We have been talking about
Yes. All the three expert
Vice
panelists have
Chancellor,
Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Chauhan is here. If he would
I unmute myself only to say good morning and hello to Madam Nirmala Bujji. It's a pleasure for me to get together. Madam, welcome to Dharamshas National Law University virtually. And in fact, from the day one I joined here, I am telling them about you. And of course, we started a wonderful work there, Child Rights Observatory. I don't know what is the status of that observatory, but in fact, I know that you might have done something wonderful there. But I'm very happy today to see you on the panel and discussion. And you know, my other panelists, Dr. Ismail Saab, Dr. Tiwari, they are the known personalities of the country. You see, Dr. Tiwari, head and dean of the TIS, Dr. Jaswal, vice chancellor of so many universities, and again, constitutional law expert, and you, the real person who is connected with the society, with the soil, and providing us inputs, knowledge, how law functions in the society. And that is the important thing. What is the social reality of law? And what is the legal reality of the society? I think we are working on it because the changing dimensions of human rights, they can't be understood without it. So thank you very much. And I enjoyed the session. Very good presentations and especially very good questions. And my dear participants, I congratulate you all. Remember one thing, all these experts are interested in your future achievements. They are advising you. Please take their advice seriously. What they have suggested, they want to make you more and more shine in future. And hopefully, if you will take their advice, certainly our work will be done, because we at DNLU want to promote the light of learning and knowledge so that we can move forward. So thank you very much, sir. And Jaswal Saab, Arvind ji, Madam Butch, please continue with your session. Because I'm interrupting again and again. I don't want to, but I couldn't resist myself. And that's why I came again, because I forget to say hello to Nirmala Bujji last time. So please carry on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Prahlad Chauhan. Thank you for your very kind words and for your intervention.
Virtually we have met, and actually you can serve us the lunch.
I wish to. I will order Zomato or somebody else. Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. So, I guess with this, with our Vice Chancellor's intervention, we have come to the end of today's plenary session. And it was wonderful to have our expert panelists, especially their intervention after each paper and even in between the papers. I am very sure that they all must have some very important inputs to take home in relation to the papers that they just presented. And this will certainly help them in improving the quality of their paper and shape the paper when it comes out finally. So I would now request the coordinator for this international conference, Dr. Veena Roshan, to present a vote of thanks at the end. Dr. Veena.
Thank you, sir. Honorable Vice Chancellor of DNLU, respected Professor Jaswal, Professor Arvind Tiwari, Madam Nirmala, Dr. Manvendra Kumar Tiwari, paper presenters, participants from other universities, faculty members, and my dear students of DNLU. I thank all the learned panelists for sparing their Sunday morning to evaluate the papers presented in this plenary session and for giving their valuable feedback and suggestions to improve the papers. I'm sure that the session was a learning experience for all the participants who were present here. I thank Dr. Manvendra Kumar Tiwari, Associate Professor of DNLU, for moderating the session. I also thank all the participants who have attended the session from other universities and other institutions. Thank you all.
Thank you.